Hello, family. It's so great to be here live from St. Peter's Square again with a wonderful team and a new special guests. I know that all of you remember Monsignor Landry, the National Director of the Pontifical Mission Societies, USA, Dr. Matthew Bunson, our Editorial Director and Vice President of EWTN News, and Christoph Wimmer, the Europe and Asia Editor for EWTN News. And of course, I'm Montse Alvarado, your President of EWTN News. Now, we've got a lot of news individuals here, but we also have a lot of news to cover. And over the last couple of days, we've been doing our count. It really is, if you count by days, day number 5 of this pontificate. We've learned a lot about the Holy Father. We'll get to our meeting with the Holy Father later, but I do want to get your first initial impressions of how you feel that this new pontificate has really set itself aside, how the Holy Father is truly self-possessed. He's making up his own mind about things, and he's making that very clear. Monsignor Landry.
So I think the mathematician in him is really coming out. Everything's ordered, everything's logical. There's a reason behind everything that he's doing. The words that he's saying, the gestures that he's making, even the clothes that he's donning, all of it seems to be well thought out. And to me, I'm somewhat amazed. It's almost as if he's known for 69 years he would be the Holy Father, because he's ahead of almost all of the decisions that a true novice would confront. And so I've just been blown away by how well the Lord has prepared him for his new duties, and how, despite the fact that he's a White Sox fan, he's been hitting grand slams on almost every swing.
That's right.
Yeah, I remember, I think it was the early days of Pope St. John Paul II. If I remember right, there was a rabbi who was commenting on him, and he said, you Catholics, you have really found a Pope who knows how to Pope. And I think we can say that so far Pope Leo knows how to Pope. He has been very programmatic, as Monsignor has pointed out, but he's also very thematic. He is starting already to hit on the key themes that he thinks we need to hear about when he talked to us today for the journalists. What did he do? He went back to the idea and the importance of AI, artificial intelligence, and the impact it's having on civilization. But he always keeps coming back to evangelization. He keeps coming back to Christ. So this is a profoundly Christocentric pontificate so far.
Christoph, you've been leading the team covering all of this, especially here in the Vatican Bureau. You have a slew of Vatican correspondents. We met one of them, Hannah Brockhouse, who had the pleasure of sitting with us for about 3 hours while we were waiting for Black Smoke. And I think our audience had a chance to get to know her. What has this experience been like for you, and how were you getting to know Pope Leo?
We're actually doing it almost like a family, to be honest. We've got the CNA reporters, we've got the register analysts, we've got the broadcast crew, the Vatican guys, everyone working together. I know it's a trite-cliche, Montse, but it is a bit like a family. But at the same time, it's like we're meeting a new family member. There is a certain, I don't know, a vibe shift's probably a bit too crass a word, but there's a really nice change in the mood whenever you get a new pontiff, of course. There is the exuberance, the excitement, the curiosity. But to then be welcomed in the way that we were welcomed today as journalists in the encounter, in the audience hall with the Pope, in the way that we were told that this isn't just about the transmission of information, it's about the creation of culture, it's about serving truth. That felt inclusive, to your point. And Father, I think you're spot on. It's really like a mathematician doing precisely what we need and what we need to hear to come together as a family, to feel as a Catholic, a member of a family that is so large, that is universal, and then have a father tell you that. That's been an absolutely amazing experience. I hope not just for myself, but all our colleagues. And it certainly feels like we're a part of that big family. I hope the audience is part of it as well.
Certainly. Well, a 69-year-old pontiff bringing brand new energy, great intention. I think that's the word that I would give him for now. Let's see if it sticks. But great intention with everything that he's been doing and the way that he makes people feel. The feeling seems to be very important to him. We've been catching up with a couple of cardinals, trying to see how they feel post-conclave, how they felt in that immediate moment. And Cardinal Michael Czerny, it was his first conclave, gave us his first impressions of having met the Pope and how he felt about him.
We all need to welcome, to protect, to promote, and to integrate. So that's not going to change. I'm sure that Pope Leo is going to push that just as much as Pope Francis. But I think by choosing the name Pope Leo, I think he has signaled a difference in approach, which is that the issue of work, in a sense, embraces the issue of migration. It's the issue of work is even broader and deeper than the issue of migration. In fact, Many migrate because of work, and even those who migrate for reasons of security or to escape persecution, they also have to work, otherwise they're not going to have a life again.
So Cardinal Czerny was reflecting on the meaning of Pope Leo's name, why he was creating kind of like a banner theme, again, an intentional theme that absorbs all of the pieces that Pope Francis's pontificate outlined, but takes them one step further. Give us some background, Monsignor Landry. How did you feel that was described?
It's a very interesting part of his interview, because he was giving the context for these massive waves of immigration. Even if they're fleeing because of human rights abuses, even if they're fleeing because of natural disasters, or if they're fleeing just to try to provide a better life for their family traveling with them or back home in their country of origin, everybody needs work. And so what he was essentially saying is, already in his first 5 days, Pope Leo has taken one of the major themes of Pope Francis' pontificate and nourishing it and deepening it and taking it into another context. That Cardinal Czerny picked up on that immediately is impressive for him, but that is what Pope Leo is doing out of the gate. Beautiful, because especially in those contexts in which there's fear about massive moves of migrants, when we're able to speak to somebody on another through another means with another category, it can open them up to recognizing, okay, even in the United States, we're dealing with a labor situation. Because once we start to look at that labor situation, every business owner is going to say, we need employees. And so rather than somebody to fear as if they're coming from another planet called an alien, we're now beginning to see somebody who's going to be able to help increase, for example, our own economic productivity. So beautiful on the part of Pope Leo, beautiful on the part of Cardinal Czerny to note it for us all.
Now, Matthew, you and I have commented on the impact, of course, of the intellectual side of this new Pope Leo, but also on the way that he touches hearts. Let's relive this one moment that we all have remarked on, the Regina Coeli.
Regina Coeli, letare, alleluia, quia meruisti portare, alleluia, resurrexit, sicut dixit, alleluia, ora pro nobis Deum, Hallelujah.
When is the last time we heard that sung? And how significant is it that he chose to do just that, to touch people's hearts?
Well, that's right. I would have to guess that we have not heard a pope sing the Regina Coeli, certainly in modern times. John Paul II very famously had a magnificent baritone. I think it was a baritone.
Absolutely, when he would sing the Our Father during his liturgies, yeah.
But he would tend to recite the Regina Coeli. To chant it, to sing it like he did, was a motion for everyone in St. Peter's Square, but everyone around the world to take part. It was an invitation, not just to pray, but also to deepen that experience. It was a striking moment, and it was one of the most profound moments of what has already started to be a rather profound pontificate.
I wonder if he's teaching us to sing it again. And if so, if we'll see that again this Sunday. It's one of the things I'm really looking forward to see if people will sing back.
Two other little things about it. We would have expected him to start coming out from the window. Now, it's possible that the apostolic apartments aren't quite ready yet. They have been vacant for 12 years. But the decision to march out as he did on that loggia, this figure in white, the starkness of his appearance, I think was one really incredible moment, and it completely captured the imagination of everyone here in St. Peter's Square. I know we were riveted when he came out. But the other, and I know it's a Latinist, you'll appreciate this, his Latin is just a joy to listen to.
It's fabulous. Well, yes, I know you enjoy that as well. Well, let's show our audience and those listening on radio what we're going to show is that a breaking of the seal, because he is going back. He is confirmed to be going back into the Apostolic Palace. He would not be staying at the Casa Santa Marta. Let's take a look. So we have him walking in, and you'll see the seal in a second. But Christoph, walk us through this moment. Why is this so significant, the idea that he would make this choice?
Well, first of all, it's in continuity with the pontiffs and in continuity with the expectations that Catholics have. You know, that famous image that a lot of pilgrims have of the light being on over St. Peter's Square.
Yes.
Our Father is home. And of course, praying with him, perhaps in future, I hope so, singing with him in Latin, the Regina Coeli, the Angelus, maybe other things. That is all part and parcel of this habitation. We have a continuity here that, of course, was accented by Pope Francis, and it was a sort of purposeful gesture of humility. But to have the continuity now is something I'm sure Pope Francis would also agree with. And it is something, as we can see in these pictures, that carries with it the whole history that he embodies, that he wears. A habitat is not just the habit of what you're carrying yourself, what you're dressing, but it's also how and where you live.
I think that's beautiful. It is deeply Catholic, and even more Catholic is the fact that I have heard, and we will confirm, that supposedly the Blessed Sacrament, so our Lord, the real presence, was restored to that chapel, to that tabernacle. So it will also be resonating there for him to pray, obviously, but for him to be the force, Jesus Christ in this form, to be that force for the pontiff, for Pope Leo.
Sometimes when we hear the word in English, palace, we can think Versailles. This is not Versailles. This is a nice place to live, which he's got a room. If there are sisters in there caring for him, they'll have tiny little rooms. His secretary will have a small little room, but it's by no means palatial, even though we call it a palace. Palazzo in Italian basically just means building. And so we shouldn't say that his returning here is at all rejecting the simplicity of Pope Francis. Everybody at the Domus Sancti Marte, where Pope Francis was, would talk about the disruptive presence of Pope Francis there in what was a guest house, all the extra security for everybody else who was living there. And when you actually added up how much it cost, it was more expensive than in a place where everything was just focused on the Pope. But Pope Francis wanted to live at the Domus to be surrounded by people. What we're going to see, I think, with Pope Leo, as he moves eventually back in here, is that he's just going to be inviting people in, just like Pope Benedict did, just like famously St. John Paul II did.
There was a question that many people had in the run-up to the conclave. How would the next pope choose where and how they would want to live? And what would they wear? Would they come out sort of, were they now beholden because of the gestures of Pope Francis? From the moment that he walked out in the loggia, Pope Leo XIV had established himself. And it was a deliberate choice of the Mosetta, a continuity of hearkening back to papal traditions and symbols. It came now as no surprise at all that he's moving back to the Apostolic Palace. Why? Because that is also very consistent with the traditions and symbols of the papacy.
Now, there are rumors that there are changes that do need to be made. It hasn't been occupied for 12 years, so there is a lot that probably needs to happen before we see that nice light and we can say good morning and good night, Papa. But and I do hold that very dear, and I know that our Rome team does too. So until then, we'll keep waiting and reporting on those pieces, and we'll rely on you and your team to bring that information to our EWTN family. Now, we still are in the Jubilee, so those open doors of the Vatican continue to be open. People continue to pour in, obviously going through the Holy Door, but also celebrating these very specific moments that were outlined for us to remember all of the pieces of the body of the Church. And one of those is the Eastern Churches. Matthew, you sat down with Cardinal Filoni. Can you tell us a little bit about him?
Yeah, that's right. So I had an opportunity to sit down with Cardinal Fernando Filoni, who is the Grand Master of the Equestrian Order of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem. In other words, the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre, who have as their primary function to safeguard, nurture, and protect the Christian presence in the Holy Land, but also one of the great mandates is to perfect the virtues and to be holy in our own lives as members. And I asked him about the Holy Father's call for peace and the very specific aspects of how he responded to that.
Let's take a listen to that.
He said that the first announcements, the peace be with you. La pace sia con voi. The peace of the risen Lord be with you. To the city of Rome, to the world. And I am sure it will remain essential part of his pontificate. But not in the sense of a sociological aspect or political aspects. He said the peace of the risen Lord. If there is not the peace of the Lord, men never will make peace. They will make an agreement, after a while it will be completely abandoned. So he put at the center of the peace the person of Jesus, the risen Lord. I think we have to take into consideration this aspect.
At the center of the peace is a Christocentric peace. It's the only way that we will find true peace. Today we had some news of a phone call with President Zelensky. We are waiting to see if a hostage will be released, the last American hostage. What can you tell us about today's news and the way that the Holy Father is pursuing this kind of peace?
It's an incredibly powerful expression of the message that we got straight from the Word going. This pontificate, Leo steps out, says, peace be with you, and then he becomes a peacemaker, hopefully, purposefully, with a phone call, with the development of what the Church has said all this time, of course, about this conflict. Let's find peace, let's find dialogue and a solution. This is something that's really carrying like a red thread through this pontificate, I find. Speaking to the journos today, he was saying the witness of truth that journalists that are being held hostage is incredibly important and powerful. You can see that, not only is his heart in the right place, it is a heart pierced like that of St. Augustine in his coat of arms with the love of God and with the love of humans for the love of God. And to see that play out in this incredible message is something I find deeply moving, but in a more political sense perhaps, speaking as a journalist admittedly, also promising.
Now, we all waited around 8 o'clock in the morning for them to open the doors at 11 o'clock to be able to see the Holy Father for that encounter with international media, with the journalists. And it was remarkable to see him walking in, received with applause. I know we have these images to share for those on radio. He walked into this very, very large hall, was received with great applause, and he gave us a wonderful message, exactly what you mentioned, Christoph, this idea of truth being central, of truth being something that allows us to make our own decisions according to our lives. And I think that that's really remarkable. There were a lot of members of the EWTN team. I was so proud to see that no matter where you turned, there was someone from EWTN there. And it was my great privilege to get to represent our EWTN family and shake the Holy Father's hand. And I told him how much we love him and how much we, as we represent a global family ourselves, with all of the languages and all of the traditions too, because we have Eastern people in our team as well. And it was wonderful to see and feel him as his own man. Truly, a powerful, powerful man, and such a contrast to the vulnerability that you saw with him singing, to him actually shaking your hand, and that's a firm, real handshake, very loving, very affirming, but he's his own man. You were there too, Monsignor Landry.
Well, first, in terms of the firm handshake, I've been accused of it my entire life because he's a tennis player too.
There you go.
And so we're used to doing forearm muscles around tennis rackets. But what was interesting for me as first a pastor and then as somebody who writes and comes on television, that he reminded everybody there of the vocation of journalism. And then he described the development of that vocation through the virtues of a journalist. He talked about truthfulness. It's a characterization of many journalists that they have to be a little bit cynical because some people are going to feed them lines, fake news, you name it. So they've got to have just a healthy enough suspicion, but they can't become cynical. And so he was reminding us of truthfulness. He was reminding us of that great service of charity. Likewise, he was reminding everybody in the world of the courage of so many journalists going into war zones in order to be able to bring the truth on out. He showed that same courage where in front of more than 100,000 people, he tried to intone as an alto his Regina Caeli for the entire world yesterday. You're a singer. You know that you might be able to get some butterflies in a circumstance like that.
100%.
But that was a courageous man who's a truth teller and also somebody who's living by the love of the Lord, who's been captivated and wants contagiously to pass it on, to say that those virtues pervade every vocation, including the exalted vocation of journalism. And I was edified at every level.
Now, Matthew, you are writing a book on the Holy Father. Right now, you're under this very significant deadline. It will be available on Religious Catalog. It's part of EWTN Publishing. How did seeing him in person change that for you?
It did. It confirmed a couple of things that we have been seeing. He is self-possessed in the best possible way. There is as one of the Italian papers said, un papa calma. He is a very calm, almost serene pope. And you could see that today. He's already so comfortable in his role as a successor to St. Peter. And part of that ease then is the willingness to talk to journalists in a way that was very friendly, but also very clear. I mean, one thing that I think we're going to be getting from Pope Leo is clarity in his teachings. Even when he hit on that theme again today about the risks and dangers of artificial intelligence, there is a clarity to it, but it's also very consistent. As we were saying earlier, it's very programmatic, but it's also very thematic. There's also, when you see him walking through the crowd, there is also a self-assurance, but there's no pride. It was very interesting. This is a pastor, but it helps to remember what the P period in his name means. He is Pastor Pastorum. He is the pastor of pastors and readily is living that now.
Well, this pastor has a great sense of humor. And it was
Yes,
really
he does.
nice to hear him start in English, which was beautiful, obviously. A nice greeting in English, and then moved on to his message in Italian. But before that, he had a really great joke that I want to make sure everyone gets to hear.
Hey, good morning, and thank you for this wonderful reception. They say when they clap at the beginning, it doesn't matter much. If you're still awake at the end and you still want to applaud, thank you very much.
Obviously, we all got up and clapped. It was remarkable to be there with him, and obviously he had this just a nice welcome for everyone, but he knew that he needed to break the ice because the relationship with the press is always something tenuous. I was sitting next to someone from the New York Times who, when we received the blessing, did not cross himself, so he knew that he was in an audience that was both churched and unchurched. And I think that breaking the ice in this way, speaking to us in English, marked some of the ways that we will see him again stick with tradition and then break traditions to welcome people into the church. Do you think there was anything else that told us something about him in this audience that you would remark on?
Actually, I would like to cast a glance away from the audience to reflect on the audience all the way to Peru and his diocese. Because as we reported in Spanish, we report in English and Spanish, in German, in Italian, in Portuguese, in so many languages, not just different registers. And there's 10,000 people with the bishop, and there's pastors coming, celebrating, and the people are coming out. And it is a legacy of his time as a bishop, as a missionary before, and the way that he served there. Pastor pastorum, servus servorum. And that was something that I then saw reflected in an incredible fashion in his encounter. I'd like to maybe use the following image for that. It is not the Pope coming out and talking to you. He was talking with us.
That's true. He was bringing us together.
And that was just glorious.
You brought up the blessing, and that was the big change today from 12 years ago when Pope Francis came on out. Lots of journalists, those who are Catholic, had brought religious goods to be blessed, and they themselves wanted to be blessed. And it was even told that at the end that the Pope would give us the blessing, but Pope Francis chose, because of the presence of the non-Christians there, not to give a blessing, but just to lead everybody in a little prayer. Today, Pope Leo blessed everybody, which to me shows that he recognizes he's an instrument of our triune God, and that he sees his biggest responsibility being the means through which God can bless us all. And so I was very touched. Again, it's a small little change from what came that re-emphasizes that he's his own man doing his own thing. But I'm particularly grateful anytime I'm able to receive the blessing of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, especially through the Vicar of Christ on earth. And so we can't let that just pass. That was important.
And Matthew, am I correct that he blessed us in Latin?
I believe it was Latin. Once again, magnificent enunciation of the Latin. but also the richness and the fullness of it. And it's something that I think a lot of the journalists, they're not going to encounter this very often. Many in that room had come here specifically for the sede vacante, for the conclave. And in fact, he took a moment to thank the journalists who were here in Rome specifically over these last weeks. This is a type of prayer, this is a moment that many of them will not encounter very often in the line of their work, because many of them, of course, aren't Catholic. Some of them probably aren't even Christian. So to have that encounter and that blessing, I think, could be life-changing in ways that they may not even appreciate yet.
Absolutely. Well, I know that we're all looking forward to everything else that the Catholic News Agency will be doing with their live blog, the commentary and analysis on the National Catholic Register, which will also, if you need a National Catholic Register, you can always come and sign up and we can send you one. There's a wonderful tribute to the new Holy Father, helping you get to know him and really kind of lean into his background, especially as an American. And I think that's the last piece that's important to note. We're really getting to know an American Pope. And as much as people want to say he spent so much time outside of the United States, he really greeted us today as an American, sounding like an American. And that's something that we have to pray for and reflect on, certainly over the next couple of weeks and leading up to his inaugural Mass this Sunday, which we will be live streaming here with Live from the Square. We'll be with you an hour beforehand to help unpack it and prepare you for that experience. We know a lot of dignitaries will be here as well. And on Friday, he will be meeting with them to welcome them before he has that nice final celebration to just really put a perfect seal on this experience. Thank you so much for joining us. EWTN family, God bless you.